The Air Force from InWin is a build-it-yourself gaming case. That's right, you need to build the case yourself, which is a pretty cool idea. But is it any good? Let's find out. What's up everyone, Eric here and welcome to Hardware for Gamers. For those of you who are new to the channel, I review and test PC cases, CPU coolers, and PC case fans. So if you end up liking this video, can you please hit that like button, and if you really like the video, maybe think about subscribing. It does help out a lot. As always, there will be timestamps down in the description, so you can jump to whatever interests you, but I do recommend you watch the whole review. Now before I get into the overview, just to have full disclosure, InWin did send me over this case to review, but as always, all the opinions expressed in this video are mine. Now this video is going to be on the overview and testing of the case. I've already assembled the case, so if you end up liking what you're seeing here, you can go check out my live stream of me assembling the case to see if this is really for you. Okay, the InWin Air Force has two color options, the Phantom Black and the Justice White. These cases have an MSRP of $210 USD. I picked the Phantom Black because I'm not entirely sure on the colors of the Justice White. The Justice White is very in your face. Now I can see some people liking that, but the boomer in me is just not sure about having blue, yellow, red, and white on a case. Okay, getting right into this. The dimensions of the Air Force are 53.7 centimeters high by 27 centimeters wide by 52.8 centimeters deep. So this is a big case. InWin does provide a large bag that has all the screws and fittings in it. This bag did also have all the screws that were used to assemble the case. There are some zip ties. There's the assembly manual, which wasn't all that helpful when assembling the case. There are 4 ARGB fans, an ARGB hub. So if your motherboard doesn't have a 5-volt ARGB header, you can use this instead. Now taking a look at the front of the case, there is no front panel, there's just a magnetic dust filter. This dust filter sits flush with the outer frame, giving it a very clean look. The dust filter can be easily removed by just slightly pushing it in off the top and pulling it away. Now this dust filter is fairly dense, so that's something we need to take a look at when it comes to temperature testing. With the dust filter removed, looking back at the case, we see the plastic inner frame, with there being room for up to 3 120mm fans. The front I/O is just above the front dust filter. There are separate ports for the audio out and microphone. There are 2 USB 3.0 Type A ports, 1 USB 3.1 Type C port, as well as a power button. So there is no restart button on this case. Now along the top of the case, there's a second large magnetic dust filter and room for up to 3 more 120mm fans. Now taking a look at the rear of the case, we see the rear I/O, a 120mm rear exhaust fan location. There are 8 horizontal expansion slots, which all have reusable covers. And finally at the bottom, we see the power supply location. Taking a look at the bottom of the case, there are 2 plastic feet. These feet do run the width of the case. These feet do have rubber pads on them, so the case won't slide around. Now, these feet only give 16mm of ventilation for the power supply. There is no base or bottom to this case, it is just open, which is definitely different than a standard case. Moving on to the right side of the case, there is a glass panel. To remove the right side panel, press down on the 2 plastic buttons on the top of the panel. Tilt the panel back, making sure that the bottom tabs don't catch as you lift the panel away. This side panel is 3mm tinted tempered glass, with the top and bottom of the panel being plastic. Moving to the left side of the case, the left side panel is the same as the right side panel. So to remove the left side panel, press down on the 2 plastic buttons on the top of the panel, tilt the panel back, making sure the bottom 2 tabs don't catch as you lift it away. So to reinstall the side panels is pretty simple. Align the 2 bottom tabs with the cutouts on the outer frame, then tilt the panel up. Once the top of the panel is touching the outer frame, push the top of the panel into the cutouts on the outer frame, and this will lock the panel in. Now, some wiggling of the panel may be required to get everything aligned to properly snap the panel in. And that's it for the exterior of the case. Now, before I move on to the interior of the case, if you like what I'm doing here, can you please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel? And if you really want to help out the channel, I also have an Amazon Associates link. So if you click on one of the links in the description and then add an item or items to your cart and order them, the channel will get a small kickback at no extra cost to you. So the inside of the case. As you can see, there is no basement, meaning we can see the power supply. So having a modular power supply will definitely be a plus in this case. Looking at the motherboard tray, there are a lot of well-placed cutouts along both the top and front of the case. There is also a GPU support bracket to help with GPU sag. There is room for two 2.5-inch SSDs on the front side of the motherboard tray. There is also a removable drive cage. This drive cage can hold two 2.5-inch drives and two 3.5-inch drives. So it is possible to hold up to 4 2.5-inch drives and two 3.5-inch drives in this case. Now, as I just said, the drive cage is removable. To remove the drive cage, all you need to do is pinch the tabs on the front of the cage, then slide the cage back and lift it away. Now, this cage is two separate plastic pieces, so it is possible to just remove the top section of the cage if you want just a little bit more room, but still want to mount a 3.5-inch drive. Now, if you're wanting to install a 360mm rad on the front with the barbs down, because you watch a lot of Gamers Nexus, you will need to remove at least the top section of the drive cage. Moving over to the power supply location, with the drive cage installed, there is 255mm given for the power supply and cables. Now, if you remove the drive cage, there will be 450mm for the power supply and cables. Okay, the Air Force supports mini ITX, micro ATX, and ATX motherboards. There is also support for eATX up to 330mm, if that is something you're into. Now, I do believe cable management will be a nightmare in those ETX sizes, but again, if you're going ETX, you probably understand that. The max GPU length in this case would be 430mm. If they build cards that big, I'm actually not sure if they do quite get that large, but that will be cut down if you go with a front-mounted radiator. Finally, the max CPU cooler height is 170mm. Turning the case around, there is 28mm given behind the motherboard tray for cable management, thanks to the design of the side panel. There are a number of cable tie-offs on the front end of the case, but there aren't any cable tie-offs at the rear of the case, which I do find a little strange. And that brings us to the cooling options. Because this case is a build-it-yourself case, there is no stock fan configuration, but InWin does provide 4 AL120 Luma fans. These fans have a 4-pin fan connector and a splitter, so they are PWM, and a 5-volt ARGB connector, and that has a splitter as well, so it is possible to just daisy chain all these fans together. So you do get the 4 stock fans to place as you wish, but this case can support up to 7 120mm fans. So that's 3 fans along the front, 3 fans along the top, and 1 fan at the rear. Now, if you do prefer having 140mm fans, this case isn't going to work for you because it does not support 140mm fans. Now, for radiator support, you can have up to a 360mm radiator along the front or up to a 360mm along the top. And that's it for the overview of the InWin Air Force. Now, before I get onto my build notes, if you are finding this video helpful, you may want to check out some of my other case reviews. I'll put a card above to the playlist, and I'll also have it linked down in the description. Starting off with cable management, I was able to fit the non-modular power supply as well as all the cable extensions into the case and had no issue getting the right side panel on when I was done, which is, I guess, to be expected in a case this size. Now, my OCD is not liking that there are no cable tie-offs on the back half of the case, meaning nicely managing the EPS cable is nearly impossible. So yeah, my OCD was triggered when doing this cable management. The included fans had a max RPM of around 1820-ish, with the minimum RPM being around 630-ish. The ARGB LEDs on these fans look good. The color looks pretty evenly spread and pretty vibrant. The amount of light they put out is pretty good. They do manage to light up the inside of the case pretty well. Now for the GPU support bracket is very strange. The adjustability of the bracket is not good, but I guess if you need the GPU support bracket, it is an option here. It's just the way you have to adjust it is very inconvenient, I guess. Because you do actually have to like screw it into place and everything. It doesn't adjust easily. Now just something I wanted to make note of, because I'm not sure how well you can see it in the video, but this is a very open case. The side panels don't even close off the case. Like it is essentially an open case without being an open case, if that makes sense to you. I bring this up because dust might be a big issue in this case, or it might not be an issue whatsoever. I'm really not sure because I've never really had a case quite like this because there's not many cases like this. The final thing I wanted to talk about was I was getting a lot of weird white streaking of something on the case after I assembled it. I understand and know I sweat a fair bit, but I've never seen anything quite like this before. So I don't think it was me, or at least only me, because it seemed to be in places that I never really touched, or at least didn't touch very much. I'm really not too sure what this is or what's happening here. Now it did clean up pretty easily with some cleaning vinegar, but yeah, it was pretty strange. And that's it for my build notes, so on to the temperature testing. If you do have any questions on how I test the cases, please check out my case testing methodology video. I'll have a card above and I'll also have it linked down in the description. Now I didn't end up testing too many configurations here because it comes with 4 fans, and the temperatures were actually pretty good with the initial configuration I used, so I kind of just went with it. The fan configuration I used was 3 front intakes and 1 rear exhaust, and that's the way it was for all the stock testing. Now taking a look at the CPU workload temperature testing first, with my stock fan configuration at 35 dBA, the average CPU temperature was 67.9 C. With my stock fan configuration running at full speed, the average CPU temperature was 66.8 C. So only a 1 Celsius difference between the full speed test and the 35 dBA test, so not much difference at all. For the fan normalized test, the average CPU temperature was 65.9 C. And when I removed the dust filters and had my stock fan configuration running at full speed, the average CPU temperature went down to 64.7 C, meaning the dust filters are not restricting much airflow to the CPU. For the game testing, with my stock fan configuration at 35 dBA, the average CPU temperature was 42.6 C, and the average GPU temperature was 71.4 C. With the normalized fans, the average CPU temperature went down to 38.6 C, and the average GPU temperature was 70.6 C. With my stock fan configuration running at full speed, the average CPU temperature was 40.6 C, and the average GPU temperature was 67.5 C. And when I removed the dust filters and had my stock fan configuration running at full speed, the average CPU temperature was 39 C, and the average GPU temperature was 67 C. And again, this means that the dust filters are not restricting much airflow to the CPU or GPU when gaming. Okay, so when comparing the Air Force to all the other cases I've tested, my stock fan configuration when running at full speed had a sound level of 38 dBA, so it was really loud. Now moving on to the CPU workload testing, this InWin case ties the LAN-Cool 2 with the lowest CPU temperature, but you do have to remember that the Air Force has a dBA of 48, when the LAN-Cool 2 mesh has a dBA of 37.2, so yeah. In the game testing, the Air Force trades blows with the LAN-Cool 2 mesh again. The Air Force does have a lower GPU temperature, but the LAN-Cool 2 had the lower CPU temperature. Moving on to the noise equalized testing, so all the cases have been noise equalized to 35 dBA, or they just run at full speed if they don't actually reach 35 dBA. In the CPU workload test, the Air Force is third from the top, which is pretty impressive since the fans are only running at 30%. In the noise equalized game testing, the Air Force performed well, landing just below the top performing cases. The CPU temperature is quite good when compared to the other cases around it, but I do sort by GPU temperatures here. Moving on to the fan normalized testing. So the sound level of the Air Force with the 4 Arctic P12 fans was 39 dBA, which in contradiction to the stock fans is quite quiet and actually has it at the top end of the chart. In the CPU workload test, the Air Force is at the top of the chart, pretty much tying the H1M Pro and the 275R Airflow. For the game testing, the Air Force is in the middle-ish of the chart. Now the GPU temperatures are pretty good, but they're not quite as good as some of the other cases in this test. So what do I think of the Air Force from InWin? All in all, I like it. It looks nice, it's really easy to build in outside of not having any tie-offs for the EPS cable. It comes in different colors, and the GPU and CPU temperatures are good. Now I understand there is the whole building the case yourself thing, which I can understand might turn some people off or might make some people hesitant, but the assembly really wasn't too bad for me at least. I was able to unbox and assemble the case in 90-ish minutes, and that was pretty much blind, meaning I didn't watch InWin's assembly video, and I tried not looking at the instructions as much as possible, but the instructions weren't great and actually made me do something wrong. So yeah, it still only took me 90 minutes, so it really wasn't that bad. I can see, like, if you do have kids or whatever, actually like kind of plotting out 2 to 3 hours and doing this with your kid, I could see that being a lot of fun. So if you are thinking this seems cool, but I don't know, you should probably check out InWin's or my video on assembling it, and that should give you a really good idea. Because if I were to rebuild the case, it probably would only take me 20 to 25 minutes to actually build the case. Now again, unboxing is a whole experience as well, because you do get a lot of pieces. It can seem overwhelming, but it is pretty simple. Like, all in all, there's like 12 pieces, so it's not that bad. Now there are some things you should understand before buying the Air Force. First thing that comes to mind is you are paying for the experience of building your own case, with that price tag being 15 to 25 USD. I am comparing the Air Force to the 5000D, which is 170 USD, but it only comes with 2 fans, so you would have to add in additional fans on that. And the Torrent from Fractal Design, which is 190 US dollars, which is pretty comparable because you get about the same number of fans. It's about the same size. Like the Torrent from Fractal Design is a pretty decent comparison to this. Which brings me to my next thing. This is majority plastic. Those other cases are steel. So this does have some give or movement within the frame. I'm not saying it feels like it's gonna fall apart, but it's not riveted steel. Like riveted steel, like you can torque on it, it's not really gonna do anything unless it's really cheap steel. The 5000D and the Torrent are great cases. They are very solid cases. The feel of this is going to be different. Again, it's a different experience, and you have to understand that you are paying for the experience. It's kind of like the whole custom water cooling thing. Price to price, it really doesn't make sense to do custom water cooling. You are paying for that experience. Well, that's all I got for this one. If you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you're still watching, maybe hit that subscribe button and the bell icon so you get notified whenever I drop a new video. Please follow me on Twitter at HFG_YT. There's also the HFG Discord server. It is a great place to get a hold of me and ask me some questions if you need help with something. You might want to check out these videos here. They should be along the lines of something, cases, coolers, something. I do a lot of stuff. And as always, thank you very much for watching, and see you next time.